Hi guys, welcome back to my channel and to a brand new video. Today I'm going to be doing some autumn reading recs for you. So obviously we have autumn coming up pretty swiftly, and I feel like that's my favourite season to be reading all these like spooky or atmospheric books. So I thought I'd show you my favourite recommendations for the autumn season of books I've read previously. I would say most of them I read in the autumn, or books I wish I'd read in the autumn, or fall for you Americans. I'm gonna start off with fantasy. My first recommendation is one that like most of you will have probably have read or at least heard about, and that is Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. I know it's a basic recommendation considering everybody is talking about this, has been talking about it for the last year, but the sequel is coming out I think in November, so that makes this even more perfect to pick up now. If you do not know what this book is about, you follow Viv, who is an orc. You can see her there. She doesn't want to do the life of, I think she was an assassin anymore. She doesn't want to live that life. She would like to settle down and open her own coffee shop. And that is what she does. The issue is that nobody really knows what coffee is. And so she kind of faces a lot of battles in opening up this coffee shop. Is this a plot-heavy book? Absolutely not. It is very much no plot or vibes. It is just opening up a coffee shop, and I think the sequel is based in a bookshop, and that's about it as well. The most amazing part about this story is the characters. All of the side characters and Viv as well fill your heart with so much joy, especially Thimble. I mention him every time. Thimble is my favorite thing ever. He's a little mouse. I don't think you'll be able to see him because it's so dark, but he's down here and he's a little mouse and he bakes for the coffee shop. And he is absolutely adorable. Like, nobody ever understands my love for Thimble. I would give up my soul for Thimble, truly. So if you have not read this book and you have not met Thimble, I mean, click off this video, read the book, and then come back. I think this is the perfect recommendation for autumn, because I don't know about you, but a cozy coffee shop where there's like a little fireplace and it's dark and the smell of baked goods and hot coffee, that to me screams autumn. Next up, I know this is also a very popular book. We have Kingdom of the Wicked by Kerri Maniscalco. It's safe to say I like this book just based on the extortionate amount of tabs. This is definitely my most tabbed book ever. I absolutely adored this book. This first one is YA, but the rest of the series is new adult. My recommendation does go for the whole series. There's something about this first one specifically though. It's set in Sicily, where we follow Emilia, whose sister, her twin sister, Vittoria, is murdered. He also finds a king of hell, prince of hell, Wrath, banding together to solve the murder of Emilia. What I love about this story is this first book specifically, the descriptions of Sicily and the market and the food scream autumn to me, and especially with this being a dark murder mystery, this is the season for those books for me. Anything dark, mysterious, fantasy, for me is this season. The cover, the brown, the dead roses, it's all just giving autumn to me. I would 100% recommend, if you were going to pick up this book, it would to be in the coming months. Maybe winter at a push, but I would definitely pick up this one sooner rather than later. By Holly Black, again, another one that you're definitely going to have heard of. I know, I'm not being very original here. I'm going to try and give some more unique ones shortly. Again, a very annotated book, very heavily annotated book for me. We are following Jude, who is a human being and is, her sister is half fae. She's a human. She gets kidnapped by her half-sister's father while he murders their parents and takes them to the land of Fairy. Or Fairy, I'm not sure. And they have to live out their lives there. She meets the cruel prince, Carden, and it's kind of just their story. I know a lot of people call this a fantasy romance. I have to disagree. I think if you go into this expecting a fantasy romance, you're going to be so disappointed, because the romance is a very small subplot of this series and it's more of a political intrigue YA story. But I absolutely love this series. It holds a very special place in my heart. And the reason I would recommend it for autumn is because Fairy is just screaming autumn. Fairy is an island adjacent to the human world, and it's full of trees. It's a forest. That's basically what it is, a forest world. a map in here? Yes, you can just kind of see all of the trees and it just screams autumn. I love a forest setting in autumn. That to me is, that's it, you know, autumn trees. For some reason they just mix for me in my head. The cover screams autumn with the bare branches. There is nothing like it. The characters are so intricate and in depth. Like, don't get me wrong, you hate some of them, and even the main characters, you hate a lot of their actions, even though you love them. But this whole series is just so special, and well, every time I wanted to reread this book, I tried to pick it up in the autumn because I feel like it has such a good vibe for that time of the year. But yeah, as you can tell, I absolutely love this book, so I had to mention it in my recommendations. I think I'll move on to the horror option because I feel like you have to have a horror option in autumn. I mean, it's spooky season. And the horror that I have gone for is The Haunting of Blackwood Manor by Darcy Coates. Now, the way I describe Darcy Coates' haunted house novels is cozy horror. Because yes, they're scary, yes, they're horror, yes, they're paranormal. But I feel like you also get to see a really in-depth, well-rounded character trying to go on a new life journey, and it has inspired my own writing. I think they're brilliant. I recommend all of the books. I really like The Haunting of Ashburn House as well, but I've gone for this one because it is just better than Ashburn House in my opinion, and is my favourite of the books I've read of hers so far. Follow Mara, her childhood. She was brought up by people who believed in witchcraft, and they would hold seances, and she believed it was a scam. So when she moves into a house and starts to realise that ghosts could be real, it all comes crashing down at her that maybe her childhood wasn't as wrong as it seems. This is so atmospheric because the house is in the woods. Again, in case you haven't noticed a theme here, I love the woods in autumn time. Haunted, rugged, run-down house with terrible electricity, and she hasn't got a cooker because it doesn't work because there's very little electricity, and creepy things happening, scratches in the doors. It all just screams to me spooky season. I mean, what better time is there to read a horror than at spooky season October? Oh, hello gift note. In my humble opinion, there is no better time, and you can guarantee over the next 3-4 months I'm going to be picking up so many Darcy Coates books because they are my favourite. They're so bingeable. I don't think there's any of her books, oh sorry, maybe one, other than one, I don't think I haven't read any of her books in one sitting. I just think they're so easy to read and so bingeable and so atmospheric. You completely lose yourself in these characters and these stories and these isolated house settings. For that reason, you have to pick these books up in spooky season. They're going to definitely provide you that spooky sense that you're probably looking for. The next book that I would like to recommend to you is a recent favourite from this year, and that is Hex by Jenny Fagan. This I want to go in prefacing as a warning. It is very dark and very sad, so do be aware of that going in. We follow Galis, who at this precise moment in time is stuck in a cell deep underground and is due to be hung for being a witch. I'm not sure what the year is. Oh, 1591. And we follow Iris, who is like a modern day woman, but has turned into a bird and has gone to visit Galis in her timeline. It is a very odd story. It is a very short story. Powerful fictional retelling of North Berwick witch trials. This is really, really sad. You hear Galis recounting what has happened to her in recent events since being accused of being a witch, and kind of just talking about the struggles of being a woman, hoping for the future for things to have changed, and Iris kind of telling her about the future a little bit as well. It says that Hex is a visceral depiction of what happens when a society is consumed by fear and superstition, exploring how the terrible force of a king's violent crusade against ordinary women can still be felt right up to the present day. This made me sob, so I do want everyone to go in with a warning. There's a lot of trigger warnings for this you should look up, obviously. It is very, very heartbreaking of a story, but so worth the read. I absolutely love this. I read a library copy. Was it this year? Was it end of last year? I think it was the beginning of this year. And I had to get my own copy because I just loved it so much, and I just want to annotate the heck out of it, and I will be rereading it in the coming months. Again, the reason that I've kind of picked this as an autumn rec is because it's about witches. I feel like witches scream autumnal. Maybe that's just me, but they do for me, and I always want to read a couple of witch books in the spooky season, And I feel like even though this isn't exactly a witch story, considering it's literally about women being wrongly accused of being witches, it still holds that magical touch. And yeah, I would just recommend it, especially with when you think about the bird, the fact that Iris becomes a bird. It is just very, very interesting. It is very, I don't want to say atmospheric, but you do lose yourself in the storytelling. You can really picture yourself there with Galis and her horrors, which I'm not saying is a very good thing. It's quite a hard thing to read again. I really want to accentuate that this story can pack a punch no matter how short it is, and you should be checking out trigger warnings. But a beautiful, powerful, and important story nonetheless that I definitely encourage people to pick up in the coming months, and I will be doing so as well to reread this amazing story. I'm not going in any order here now. Let's pick up Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, my favourite classic of all time, my favourite classic author of all time. I actually just watched the original Alfred Hitchcock movie of this the other day because I watched the new adaptation movie with Lily James and Armie Hammer or something is his name. And I hated that. I feel like they turned this book into a romance, which it absolutely is not. I recently watched the Alfred Hitchcock black and white movie and it put me so in the mood, and I need to put you on this book because there is not more of an autumn book in this world. You can't convince me there is. Even though I'm pretty sure it's set in the summer. Rebecca follows our unnamed protagonist who marries her husband and moves back to the house of Mandalay. Mandalay sits on a cliff face. It has acres of land full of trees and even a beach cove. It has endless rooms. It's a great, very big manor estate. The problem is that Mandalay is kind of haunted, but not in a traditional sense, but haunted by the memory of Rebecca through her husband, through Mrs. Danvers, one of the housekeepers, through all of the staff, through her belongings. Everything is just haunted by the memory of Rebecca. Even though this book does not have a ghost in it, the ghostly presence is so prominent. You feel as though Rebecca is there with every page. This book is long, and I know a lot of people complain of boredom, but I feel as though that is intentional. You're supposed to feel the repetitive actions of our unnamed protagonist's life and the way that she is such a bored woman in the house with nothing to do but to be cursed by the thoughts of Rebecca. She has nothing else to do. She has to think of Rebecca all the time because her brain is occupied with very little else. Mandalay is so atmospheric. It's one of the places that if I could visit anywhere, fictional or non-fictional, I would go to Mandalay. It's my number one. This is my favourite book of all time. It used to be Crescent City. It is not anymore. It is this book. I will again hopefully be rereading this in the coming months because I recently watched the movie, as I said, and it's given me so much motivation to pick this up. If you have not picked this up, I would definitely encourage you to do so. Even if you're not a fan of classics or you're intimidating by the writing style, Daphne du Maurier is one of the most accessible classic authors. My next recommendation is Catherine House by Elizabeth Thomas. It's been years since I read this. We're following Inez, who has been enrolled into Catherine House, which is a university where you spend 3 years having zero contact with the outside world, including your family. This is a very, very peculiar book. I think it's brilliantly written. I don't usually love a weird book where you don't understand what's going on with an open ending. It is very peculiar, but I feel like the point is that Inez is struggling to keep a grip on reality, and you definitely feel that through her experiences. This is YA, and again, I haven't read it in 3 years, so maybe I wouldn't love it as much now, but I do just remember being so entranced. And when I finished the book, I just remember not really being able to adjust back to the real world for a couple of hours. Like, you know, when you finish a book and you find yourself very quiet, you find yourself sitting there, maybe you have a cup of tea and you're just spaced out. I feel that quite often with my books, and this is one that did that for me. And I remember just spending hours and hours just sitting there like, I don't know what's real, I don't know what's going on. this was that book for me. The reason I recommend it for autumn season is not only because it's a little bit spooky, so again, it's great for the spooky vibes, but also it's so atmospheric in a dark sense. Catherine House has a very foreboding feel, a very intimidating large feel, very similar to Mandalay in my opinion. It's nice to have a little YA horror. I do enjoy YA horror, so this is one that I would recommend. But again, it's so strange. It is gothic, and I absolutely love gothic books in the autumn. And yeah, it's hard to describe because of how crazy it is. This is a wild book. And all the things that it says in the front is so accurate. Intoxicating, atmospheric, a hypnotic delight. It couldn't be described any better. I would 100% recommend this if you haven't already picked it up. A brilliant story. Next up, we have Circe by Madeline Miller. This was the first ever mythology retelling I read, and I think it started me on this long chain of just loving mythology. Obviously, this is a retelling of Circe. If you do not know the story of Circe, she gets banished to the island of Ayaya, which is an island that provides completely for her. She can live off the land, but she has to live in complete isolation. So somebody comes along to the island, quite a few people come along to the island, but one mortal comes to the island and changes everything for Circe. This is a story of feminism, empowerment, romance, being doomed, everything. This is just a beautiful story. And the reason I kind of, again, relates to autumn is because it's very natural, which I associate a lot to autumn. You know, set on the island. You can just see from the colours on the cover and all of the beautiful imagery. Either this is a late summer or an early autumn read. I just think it is so beautiful. You can see all of the trees on the map of Ayaya. And again, I haven't actually reread this since I first ever read it, which is a crime. I didn't love the Song of Achilles. I actually really disliked the Song of Achilles. So if you are someone that hasn't picked this up because you didn't like the Song of Achilles by any chance, I would recommend you try this anyway, because again, I did not like the Song of Achilles and I read this first. So I would recommend this. And my final recommendation is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Now again, it's definitely not a underrated recommendation. Everybody talks about this book. Everybody loves this book, and rightly so. Evelyn Hugo is a Hollywood star. I'm not sure when this book is set. There we go. She kind of talks about the 1950s all the way to the 80s. So it is like historical. And I think that's kind of what gives me the vibes of autumn, less the actual story and more just the setting. I really like an old Hollywood setting, and that's just kind of the season I want to read those books in. How do you describe the story of Evelyn Hugo? It's not really a story that can be very easily described. It's a story about love, truth, power, and not taking everything at face value, I would say. I feel like the twist in this is one of my favorite twists in any book. I absolutely love it. I never saw it coming, and yeah, I absolutely love this story. I think it's so powerful, and I think they're making a movie out of it, or a TV show. I really hope they do, because I think as long as they do it justice, the story of Evelyn Hugo will be a very, very good one. Think of the costumes. You really feel the glamour through the pages. And so for me, that just comes with the feeling of autumn. Sometimes there's no reason for your recommendations, they just come to me. So those are the books that I would recommend for you to read this autumn season. Are any of them that unique? No. I don't do recommendation videos very often, so when I do, I want to talk about my favourites. And clearly I'm so basic and I have the same favourites as everyone else. That's interesting to know. But I hope that you found at least one book in this video to try out, and hopefully one you haven't really thought of trying out before. Let me know what your favourite autumn recommendation would be down below, and I'll try and check it out in the autumn season. And thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!